everyone. Welcome back for a brand new episode of The Witching Hour. I am Perri Nemiroff. I'm sitting with her. It always feels so unimportant to introduce ourselves when we have such a cool guest. I'm Perri, this is Haleigh, and this is Brendan Meyer. What's up, man? How you doing?
How's it going?
How is life?
Happy to be here.
How is life? I feel like I haven't seen you since our big new release showdown.
Yes, we had a showdown in the Schmodown.
That was fun.
It out. Yeah, that was fun.
I think that and the Jurassic Park match were my two favorite to participate in.
Yeah, well, it's like you were saying. We were talking just a minute ago about how like it's fun in the Schmodown when it's specialized, when it's something you know that you know a lot about, and whoever wins. But you're not worried that you're going to get like a string of like 6 questions about movies you have no idea what they are.
Movie release dates.
Yeah.
You really surprised me, too. I could not believe when you pulled out that Mortal Engines. I was like, who else but me has seen Mortal Engines? You have.
Yeah. That was funny. That was one where I was like, man, it's like they asked the question and I could not. I knew that I knew it, but I didn't know if I was going to get it in like the certain amount of time, and I don't know. I feel like there's something to be said. I feel like most of the time when you're watching any one of those Schmodown matches, it's like when someone's like burning all the questions to come up with it, they never come up with it. So when to actually it was cool.
I had interviewed him too, and I was still sitting there like Christian A B C.
Well, I'd heard a podcast actually at one point with Peter Jackson and talking about it, so I think that was partially why. Because I believe Christian Rivers had worked on like the visual effects.
Yeah, he was a VFX guy before.
Yeah.
So we're here talking the horror stuff. So where to even begin?
No, you have a lot of good genre stuff.
Yeah,
a whole lot.
Yeah, it's funny. I've started to think about that even more and more, just like the last couple of years. How often sort of the stuff that I've done as an actor has like dipped into genre stuff, which I'm happy about. But
yeah,
what was the first horror movie you ever watched? Do you remember?
Oh, the first one I ever watched?
Yeah.
Wow, I can't remember. It's funny. I was on something recently and I got a question about like what movie scared you as a kid, and I have this really distinct memory of seeing the Michael Keaton movie White Noise, which I don't think was my first horror film, but that's weirdly enough like the first one that I remember actually, which is not the first horror film I saw, but that's the first one where I actually like saw it in a theater and was like probably a little too young. And there's like this recurring image of like 3 faceless figures.
Yeah.
He sees him in a car park and for whatever reason, that's the one that I always think of like actually being scared in my room.
I
which
know
is
how old you were. That near and dear.
Trying to think. I would have been like 6, 7, 8,
that'll do it.
Something like that. Yeah, I was definitely not even in double digits at that point. So,
it really freaks me out how much my heart
older.
is warmed by like children having that first horror image like seared in their brains for life.
Are you still afraid of faceless figures?
Oh no, now I welcome all faceless figures. I also remember I saw a play of Misery actually as well, and I remember like that also like really freaked me out.
A play of Misery.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's like a different type of horror to process when you're young.
Yeah,
like people do that to each other.
Yeah, and I think there was something about it. It was in a theater in Edmonton where I grew up, and it was a smaller theater, and it was like very intimate, you know.
They should bring Misery back to Broadway.
Yeah, I think they did a couple.
I saw it.
Did you see it?
I saw
it
with Laurie Metcalf and Bruce Willis, and it was. I just love Stephen King, period, but the production design of that was insane. I think I told you about this, where they had the house built, and what they did was it was on a rotating platform, and that's how you would get from room to room.
Oh, that's cool.
It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Oh, wow. That does sound cool. Yeah, I would love to have seen that, but I never. Well, maybe I shouldn't because it would have scared me.
I think you could handle it now.
Probably now I'd be fine because she's not faceless, so it's fine.
Exactly. Well, I am curious, like, was acting always the thing for you, or was that an unexpected journey into acting when you were younger?
No, no, it was never unexpected, and it was always the thing. And it's kind of a funny when I talk about this because I don't actually remember when I decided to be an actor. It was always there. Like, it's one of those things where you don't remember those early years. And so when I actually remember being conscious, I remember wanting to be an actor. And my parents took me to a lot of like plays and stuff when I was a kid, but both my parents have never been involved in the film and TV industry at all. And
they are lovely.
Yeah, yes.
Lovely humans.
Yes, they're both so wonderful. And that's what's amazing is they've both been so supportive of it at every step of the way, even though they themselves have no sort of connection to it. They're of course totally joking, but they always are like, well, we took you to places as a kid. Like, if we would have known, we would have taken you to the courtroom or the operating room. Hey, look, be a doctor, but yeah, so I think I really was really young and like caught the bug. But yeah, I think it even like goes further back. Like, my mom tells this story, and she showed me the picture that we were going to a production of like a kids production of Snow White when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I like was dressed as a dwarf. And she goes, "Why are you dressed up like a dwarf?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe they need another dwarf. You never know." and actually, it was just funny. But I don't remember that. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a weird. I think I just always really loved stories and was always obsessed with. I had these, like, when I was really young, had these it was a series of books called Great Illustrated Classics, and it was kind of easy to read illustrated versions of like really, really classic novels. And so I just fell in love with stuff like that, and yeah, theater.
That's so
and then,
cool that they were so supportive, because I always think of it as, you could say like, I want to be an actor,
right.
but it feels like a teeny tiny chance that someone could actually make a career in the field. So the fact that your parents were like, well, I met them at a Schmoedown event, so that feels like possibly the most supportive parents could be, right? Like, that's so supportive. Happy.
Yeah, it was funny. That week was so cool because it was the free-for-all, and that was also the same week as OA Season 2 premiere. So my grandparents were here too. Like, and my grandfather is really, really into film, and I think if you can trace it through like the bloodline at all, it's definitely my grandfather is like a huge cinema fan, and he's from Scotland, and so he came over, like immigrated to Canada and stuff, and was like a French and Latin teacher and stuff. But I think if it had made a couple different things, he probably might have been an actor or director or something.
What kind of stuff did you guys watch together, you and your grandfather?
Trying to think. A lot of older stuff. I think Lawrence of Arabia was a movie he really liked. Actually, the first time I watched The Godfather was like his DVD collection of The Godfather that he gave me. I think I watched it at like his house. So yeah. So he was always, but he and I still always talk about film now, and he still watches like all the different new films and different, he's always up to date on the Oscar stuff.
When you were first starting out, did you ever picture what path your career was going to go down? Did you ever think like, I'm going to grow up and be an action star or anything like that?
No, no, I don't think so. I think I've always liked a very like wide range of genres and different types of films and theater, and so I think it was always just about being involved in stories. Were always very, very exciting to me, because I think that's always the thing that I've enjoyed consuming the most. And so the idea of even being a part of any kind of story like that, and then that was where it started, And I think that as I got like older, now I'm like actually invested in cinema and what it means and different styles and stuff like that. So I think I'm more analytical about it now, and I actually can speak as like an adult about why I like it, but it always comes, I think, from that. It still sort of is like some 6-year-old kids, sometimes I feel like, even though there's so many other reasons now, it does sometimes feel like I'm still on some 6-year-old kids, like, I want to be an actor, and I'm still sort of like following that.
Well, we talked about this a little when we were in New York for Schmoedown. Mm-hmm. Like, you are a huge cinephile for an actor, which is not always the case. Is that like, I have interviewed a lot of actors who love film and being in it, but they don't watch it constantly.
Yeah, I think that is true, and it's not even like, I always think I'm like, I think being an actor doesn't always require being a obsessive. I mean, I always think that it helps, but I think I've probably gone overboard just from my own personal. But yeah, it is kind of funny to me actually, because like I feel like, and there are some people I know, but often as an actor, the thing that other actor friends of mine will say is like, man, you've seen so many movies. You know what I mean? I think we're all actors. Like, what are you talking about? But yeah, it is funny the way not all actors are like obsessed with like the history of cinema and different genres and all this different stuff.
Who's like the biggest fellow cinephile you've worked with?
Well, to really, I mean, I think it might be Nicolas Cage. Actually, was the person that I found, that I realized that the most was. There's probably some other people that I'm forgetting, but he's the one that I remember the most. Like, movies would come up all the time on set when we were doing Color of Space, and like he'd be referencing things. Like, I remember like the first day, he had those big glasses that he has in the movie, and he went up to the DP, and he's like, yeah, like, so Straw Dogs, Dustin Hoffman, Straw Dogs, and it's like, he's like, there's going to be big frames like Straw Dogs, and he would bring up stuff all the time, and that was really, really cool to see. And I always was telling a story to somebody about how we were sitting around, and it was me, Richard, and Nick one time, and Apocalypse Now came up, and Nick was just like, oh yeah, Apocalypse Now, that opening with, you know, the ceiling fan, and I thought, man, he sounds like the guy at your local video store. He doesn't sound like someone whose uncle made the movie and who like knew Martin Sheen, and I thought there was like a purity to the way he talked about it that was really, really cool.
I thought that might be the answer because that comes through in his interviews as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that dude loves cinema.
Yeah, and it really came across like in person.
Huh, that makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah,
it also makes me so happy to hear that like your love of your craft and what you do comes from such a pure place. Because yeah, it's not a requirement, but I definitely think that it comes through off the screen when you see someone who really like, I don't know, who really knows their shit and has that kind of passion for it beyond their own work.
And also loves what they're doing. You know, some actors are so good they can walk through a role, but I think a lot of times the passion for it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, as you were saying, it's a hard job to pursue, and it's a lot of rejection, it's a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and yeah, I don't know if I didn't have like the engine of like just passion and feeling like there's nothing else I could be involved in, I don't know if I would still be doing it, you know, because it's a lot of work.
How do you deal with the rejection, and is there a role that kind of got away, one that you saw the finished product that maybe even that you had to pass on for whatever reason, and you're like, I wish I had done that?
I think, thankfully, I don't think I've ever passed on anything that I was like, oh man. But there's a couple. I almost like don't want to get into specifics because I almost feel like it comes off poorly. Like the guy, I almost got this. But speaking about the idea of it, there's certainly been definitely a couple of parts that I think, and I've been very fortunate with the things I've gotten to work on and everything like that, but there's certainly a couple of things where I'm like, man, if that had gone, and I didn't even blow the auditions, like did the best I could do, and for whatever reason, it just goes another way. And there are definitely a couple that still like, I'm like, oh man, if I got that, then I would be in a different spot, or things would be easier. And so, yeah, that actually is a real mental, and I talk to other actor friends, and, you know, a lot of them have that. You know, a lot of people have that one role where they were, you know, reading for the director or chemistry reading with the big actor, and like it was very, very close. And yeah, there's definitely a couple, but I think that comes from that passion, because it's like, yeah, to come really close to getting like a great role and not get it, and then you a lot of times are back at square one again, you know, it is tough. But if you have that passion, if you have that drive, if there's no plan B, then like, what else am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? Like it's sort of, there's almost a freedom in that, you know, it's like, what am I'm not going to do anything else. And it's funny because I'm actually a big golf fan, and I always compare auditioning to golf, which seems silly, but and I'll try to do it really quickly because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but the idea is that every time you watch like a golf tournament, there's like 128 guys in like every field. And golf is very much focused on, of course, there's money winnings and things like that. But for the most part, if you don't win the golf tournament, nobody cares. It really is one of those sports. Like it just as a fans, like there's no one really talks that much about finishing second. Yet if you go into a golf tournament and you finish second out of 100 of the best people in the world, you've just proved so much, and you've just done such an impressive thing. But you really, in terms of bragging rights, don't get that much, you know?
So true.
And it's so hard. And I follow the tour, and they're like, you know, unless you're one of the biggest names, they're like, oh man, he won his second event in like 20 years. This is amazing. Or even some of the best people who aren't like Tiger Woods, they win like 11. And you think that's probably a similar amount for an actor. If you do 11 iconic, great roles, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah.
I was the Class A runner-up back when I when I was a young adult, and nobody remembers.
Yeah. But going back to that, it's like you have to find that. I think you have to. I look at it that way with auditions, where if you get really, really close on a great part, you have to see it as somewhat of an accomplishment for yourself, and you have to go like, well, I still finished second, third, fourth, was in the mix, and something I did worked, and you have to kind of draw on that, and you have to take that into the next thing, or else.
Right. Well, I kind of on the same, like, there is an accomplishment in it. Have you found circumstances where having been in that room opened up doors for future things?
I certainly I've certainly felt that working on things has a lot, you know, and I can almost draw a line sometimes from each one, how they all sort of help to the next one. I think for auditioning, I'm trying to remember if I ever literally auditioned for somebody and then I was able to get back. I think the biggest thing that helps is also though with casting directors.
I was just going to say,
because you wind up with the same casting directors all over again. So I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've literally gotten a part where they were like, "We saw you audition 2 years ago, and here you go." Hopefully, happen at some point. But I've definitely gotten situations where the casting director has, you know, I've come really close on something, and then the next time I go in for them, I feel like it's a little bit easier, or they remember that.
Yeah.
And so they either bring me straight to a callback, or they don't, or they push it, or it just, I've seen it happen a few times. And I have gotten stuff because I feel like I had a better chance the second time.
Right.
So I guess so.
Yeah, and I studied acting for a long time, and I would read a lot of casting director interviews because they're like the people you want to like you, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many times when they're like, well, we read him for this and he wasn't right, but I remembered him for this next role.
No, totally. And look, I mean, casting directors know what they're doing, and I think directors really trust them. And I think that every part, the casting directors have people that they also go and find people, but they also have people that they know are really, really good. And I think who you know, getting on one of those lists of a casting director is very helpful, because there's a lot of great actors. So if they've got 5 people, like if you're not one of those 5 people that they first suggest, like one of those 5 is going to be a great actor, not like all of them, you know? True. So you're fighting a bit of an uphill battle. So yeah, it's very important to make those connections.
Very random, more like tech question, but do you find yourself doing more auditions, you know, digitally over Skype or anything, or is it still the tradition of going in and because I like semi-recently I went, not for an acting audition, but I went in for like a hosting gig at some point, and it was just like the weirdest
thing.
And
I
went into a building and I just stood in a bare room in front of a camera, and it's like I'm saying the words that are on the monitor, but I'm like, what am I doing? Like, how do actors do this all the time?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I have done a couple over Skype, which is also bizarre, where you're like somewhere and they're like on Skype and you're like, can they even see what I'm doing?
Right.
But yeah, it's still pretty similar. I mean, I think that technology has moved forward a lot in the 15 years or whatever that I've been doing auditions, you know, in a professional capacity. And but I think the whole going into the room is kind of the same. I think you tape a lot more now, though.
Yeah.
I think people welcome that so much more because it's so much easier. The one thing that's changed a lot is I've noticed, like, when I first started, you always had to bring in your headshot and resume. And now it's like you never do because it's all on the internet, you know, and it's all on
you're
your
just like adding
it's
to
like
the clutter by bringing it all.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think, and you're adding like paper and all this stuff. So yeah, that's the one thing I've noticed where like I feel like, oh man, like they don't even take them. Like,
I'm not professional enough to have a headshot, but I walked in like with my resume in a manila folder. I'm like, what year am I in right now? What am I doing?
And professionalism is always a good look.
Yes. I remember when I first started in Edmonton when I was like very young, like 11 or 12. To get like the sides for the audition, I'd have to like go to the agent's office and take it out of a Dropbox because email wasn't like that like sophisticated.
Look at where we've come. So wait, because now I have to do this. Tell us about your new Apple TV. 1, why did you buy it? And 2, what are you watching on it?
Okay, so yeah, I have my Apple TV, which is great. And like I was talking about before, it's like this voice command thing is. You realize when you have the voice command thing that the physical remote is going to be gone like so soon, you know. But yeah, I've just downloaded all the base stuff. I have the Criterion channel on there, so I like watching a lot of older stuff and like foreign stuff and things like that. And I have Amazon and Netflix, and those are kind of the 3. I'm actually using Masterclass a lot lately. Like I did like the Aaron Sorkin Masterclass, and yeah,
very nice.
Yeah, I've on those, and they're very easy too. They're like 10 minutes a lot of the time, and you can like watch it on the go. And
I
gotta get into
only
that more.
Ever bought the Steve Martin one because I'm a bit obsessed with Steve Martin.
Yeah,
and I was like, what's a class by him like? And it was lovely.
Actually, you know what's interesting? Have you seen the David Mamet movie? I think it's called The Spanish Prisoner.
Oh,
you heard of this?
Golly,
It's super under the radar, but
Yeah.
that was like such an interesting Steve Martin performance. I don't remember because he plays sort of like I don't want to give away too much, but he plays a character that feels a little nefarious, and it's such a cool performance because he takes away like all the things about Steve Martin that are like warm.
Right.
And it's really, really interesting.
I'm putting this on the queue right now.
Very talented.
Yeah.
Like we know he's one of the comedy greats.
Yeah.
I always think about him in Shop Girl too, where he's
I've
not.
never seen that one, but yeah.
It's not that he's not warm, but he's not rocking the charisma. As
Yeah.
Like it's a very like a light, gentle burn as opposed to his regular like flame.
Yeah.
I'm just scarred for life by his performance in Little Shop of Horrors for obvious reasons. I have a severe fear of the dentist.
Oh, no.
That
didn't help. That didn't help.
A problem for me since elementary school.
That is, it is like Perry's. That and bees, just don't.
Oh, bees.
It's so weird.
Don't
I still
mess
I
around with
can't make
bees.
any sense of it because nothing. Did you see locally on the news too? There was a swarm here recently, and a whole bunch of people got injured.
Yeah, I actually am worried about. I'm worried about bees.
Okay.
Yeah,
You make me feel better that I'm not alone in that.
I'm
department.
worried about the bees.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. And deep down, I know that's the real problem. But just
But
in the irrational fear box.
Yeah.
That's
I know
what's
it's
in it.
I know it's totally irrational, but I think there's some book I read as a kid that was like a children's story. I think it was like, and it was about like two kids, and like one of them got a bee sting and like died because so it's like always been
my girl shit.
It is, but it's not.
Okay.
It's called something else. It's called like it was about a taste of blackberries or something. It's some kid. I'm serious. It's some kid story. It's some kid story, and it's like about these kids, and it's like it's so funny the things you watch when you're really young. They like sear in your mind.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm randomly bringing this up, but I read one book as a kid where it was like like the whole book was written like CDB. And it's like, like the letter C and then DB, easy, BZB.
Is Perry having a stroke?
No, it's worse.
Everyone's going to think that their sound cut out. They're going to be like, what happened?
It's written in letters. Like, I don't know why I'm like first thinking of that right now, but I swear it was a book that I used to read as a kid. Maybe that's why I like puzzles now.
We got to find this book for your niece.
Oh my God.
Okay. Was there a point in your career where you felt like, this is a career, like easy beasy bee? Where you're like, this is a career now. I don't have to maybe like have a backup plan to study law or something like that. Was there a project that kind of pushed you over to like, this is real now?
I think it happened in sort of like stages. The first one that really, I think, changed the whole trajectory was I did this kid sitcom called Mr. Young in Vancouver when I was like 16 years old. And it went for like 80 episodes. It was like the first multicam sitcom that they did in like Vancouver. And that got, like I was living in Edmonton and then I moved there and did that for a few years. And that gave me like a little bit more of like stability, I think, in terms of just I had a little bit more money and then I was in Vancouver. And then I think the thing that kind of really helped was the OA now has helped me kind of do that now in LA, where I'm in LA and I can kind of, afford to be here and I have something on my resume and it helped me get I have a green card now. Cause that's sort of the under talked about thing that is really challenging as like a Canadian actor is it's you really have to get a visa to begin with, but a lot of places won't get you a visa unless they have enough money to. Like, you're not going to get a guest star. No one's going to give you a visa for a guest star role or for probably even recurring unless it's a really big recurring role or some indie movie. So you're in this weird sort of cycle where when you're a Canadian actor and you're trying to break into the American market, you have to somehow get a project where it's big enough that they'll pay for the visa, but not too big that they just go with somebody else, so it's a really actually an interesting thing, a challenge that happens. And the first thing I got a visa on was this Nickelodeon pilot. And it was just that perfect thing and it didn't even wind up going, but it was kind of that perfect thing where it was a big enough thing. It was like one of the series regulars on this pilot, but they weren't like, offering to the biggest names. And they was like, they're looking for kids, right? And then actually the movie The Guest helped me out. I think that I got my second visa for that. And then I was able to kind of have an open visa. And now I have a green card, but
we love The Guest.
Oh my God, too much. I'll never forget seeing that for the first and second time because I think I went twice at South by Southwest.
Oh, South by Southwest,
the year it premiered. That was, I have this wonderful / terrible habit of finding one movie that I love so much that I watch it over and over rather than watching new things at festivals like that.
That's cool. Yeah, they just did they've been doing screenings at the Alamo Draft House, and I just went and did I moderated a Q&A with me and Adam Wingard, and it was really, was wild to see, they did 2 screenings and they were both pretty much sold out all these years later.
Do you guys keep in touch?
With
Adam and Simon.
I hadn't seen Adam in a little bit, but we keep in touch, and so I saw him, and then I see Simon pretty frequently too, and then Jess and Keith Calder, who are the producers and who also did like Blind Spotting and a couple of other things. I keep in touch with them too. I probably see them every now and then, but I'm always kind of in touch. So,
do you find that you keep in touch with the folks that you work with? Because I know some out there, and not that this is a good or bad thing, but some, you know, a project is done and then they move on.
Yeah, I think I say like I keep in touch with a lot. I think that as far as seeing people all the time, it's a smaller list just because people are so busy. But I'd say that anything that I've worked on for a long period of time, there's got to be at least like 3 or 4 people, maybe at least 2 people from each one that I'm still like in contact with or is a really, really great friend or something like that.
It certainly from social media seems like the OA crew got pretty close.
That's a great example, especially the four guys like me, Ian, Patty, and Brandon all kind of still hang out, and I'm in touch with all of them, and so that was really, really great. And those 4 guys, and it's funny the way the OA worked, right? Because the plot lines were so sort of spread out. So, and everybody did get to meet everyone and interact with one another, but everyone was in their own little ecosystem, so you didn't get to bond as much with all the other people just because you weren't physically on set with them. But the 4 of us were kind of a group from the beginning. You know, we showed up early, and we were there like in New York. They shot the first season in New York. We were there for a whole month to learn the movements, like before we even shot.
Course. Yeah, that's
to learn those like crazy wild moves. That was I actually thought I was sort of kidding in my mind, but also I was genuinely scared I was going to get fired when I got there the first day because the movements are like so complex.
They're
and
hard.
I'm not a good dancer. Like I've never really come from a dance background or any kind of movement background at all. And I got there the first day, and there was one specific thing which they actually changed. I don't think because I did badly. It was like you had to flip your hands like this, and it was like the second movement, and I was like, is it this or I can't get? And the dance instructor was like, no, you can't use your brain. You have to feel it. You can't talk about it. And I was like,
help
I'm
me.
getting fired. Like I was looking at my mind. I'm like, this is like the first day, and I was just like, oh no. Like
Those are very hard.
I'm gonna get fired.
When I go through like an OA obsession, because I watch it more than a human should, and I'm still not okay with what happened, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But when I'm in one of those periods and I have a little too much to drink, sometimes I will try to learn the movements, and it's very hard.
Well, I know what I'm challenging you to the next time we have a beer or something. Oh boy.
No, they're tough, and you know, it was very, very challenging, and it was an aspect of because I have no aspirations to be in like a Broadway musical, you know, like I have no aspirations to dance and sing and anything, and so yeah, when I got this part and they're like, and also now you have to learn complicated choreography, I was like, come on, man. Like, I just wanna
if you could play a role, like if you could play a character who is a professional fill in the blank, so you gain their skill set, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Professional. So I could gain their skill set. I don't know. I mean, it would be great. I always have these ideas of like playing some kind of like professional athlete, like a boxer or something. So they make me get into great shape once, and it happens like one time.
The Marvel makeover.
Yeah. I want to be forced to do that.
You
once.
can maybe be a pro golfer. Do you golf yourself, or you just watch?
The punchline to the story is always, no, I don't golf that much, but I'm like the only person. No, I do. I do sometimes.
Okay.
But I don't as much as I should, considering how much.
Big commitment.
Yeah, it is a big commitment. Maybe one day. I do. Yeah, speaking of playing a golfer, though, I definitely like, it's a secret dream of mine to one day make like the next great golf film, because I think there's like untapped potential.
There's not enough.
There. And there's untapped potential there, but I have my ideas of like how to make it work. And I think what's interesting about golf films is like there's a golf course in like every city in America. Like the fact that, but it's hard to dramatize, you know? So, but there's ways, I think.
Do you want to like direct that, or would that be a vehicle for you to act in?
I guess it depends. I mean, I've definitely done a lot of writing in the last few years. I'd say that's the thing that I've done. I'd like to direct, but I recently directed a short film, which was great actually. So I'm getting back into it. But I've definitely spent a lot of time writing in the last 2 or 3 years. Nothing that's come out yet, but I kind of am doing my own private film school, you know, where I write something and then show it to a few people that I've worked with, and then they tell me it's terrible, and I go back to,
That's great.
which is great. Yeah, no, it's really helpful, and it's a lot more. This sounds like, and I don't mean this to sound like I thought it was going to be easy, but it's way more difficult than I actually thought to like write a screenplay, and like you wind up making so many like little mistakes at the beginning, and I feel like it's been a really interesting learning experience where you come up with these great ideas. And then, because I've actually tried to devote a lot of time to physically writing a lot of things. I think I've gotten from like page 1 to the end about like 6 or 7 times on feature scripts like that I've gotten through. And
that's a lot though.
Yeah. But what's funny is that like, it's amazing how maybe some people just hit it out of the park the first time, but it's just been amazing like writing stuff and then showing it to people and realizing like, oh man, like didn't follow like any of the rules of story at all. Like, and it's like, it's weird, you know?
What's the most helpful piece of feedback you've gotten?
Piece of feedback that I've got
for the other aspiring writers who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
like this one.
I think it's hard to say if it's a specific piece of advice, but the thing that I've learned the most is that I think that there are very clear ideas about story structure, about like first, second, third act, and the characters like motivation and all this different stuff that you can read. And I think like for a while I was always like, but how do you sort of like take that and actually like you have to write the story somewhat by feel, and it was harder and harder. Like I'd watch movies and I'm like, I don't really see that in the movies that I'm watching anyway. Like I can't point to this stuff. But funnily enough, like it actually is very, very helpful once you have something. I think it's kind of hard to start with that in a weird way. But what I've noticed is that oftentimes you'll write a script, and then when you apply that kind of metric to it, you can help it, because you'll have all these ideas and you'll have this character and like you'll see it and then you go, oh, you know what? Like it would be helpful to shave this stuff off so that this exactly happens here. And I listen to this podcast. I listen to Script Notes, the podcast, a lot with Craig Mazin and John August. And he kind of like broke down Finding Nemo in a really, really interesting way. And then there's this other video, which is Michael Arndt, who's like Little Miss Sunshine and stuff like that. He breaks down like what he learned from. It's like literally a 5-minute video. You can find it online. And a friend of mine turned me onto it. And he basically breaks down how every Pixar first act is like a brilliantly constructed first act. And he compares, I think it's Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and the first Toy Story, which you look at them and you think, well, those are all bold, original ideas. They couldn't be more different. And then you realize that they basically all follow the same structure. And I think that was really a big eye-opener for me, where it's like, just because I'm following the same structure doesn't mean that it's going to turn out like every other movie that I've seen, you know? And I think that there's sometimes that fear, especially someone like me who watches so many movies. I think I'm always like, you know, I'm so conscious of what's been done. And I think to see that there was a structure that was followed in 3 movies that you can't say, oh, the beginning of Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Toy Story are all the same, right?
Yeah. I have to watch that before I go see Onward tomorrow
morning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you should. And it's literally, it's what's great about that video is it's like 5 minutes. It's not even, it was like a 5-minute video, and it just was like, oh, or maybe it's 10. And it was just like, oh, wow. And then you can see if Onward.
Is there anywhere we can watch the short you directed?
Well, I just did it. So I'm actually editing it right now. Yeah, cool. I did. It was great. Yeah, I've wanted to jump back into directing for a while, because I did a short a long time ago when I was younger. And just for whatever reason, pursuing acting things, and like never got together. And a friend of mine, Emily McCourt, who's an actress in Toronto, wanted to do something as an actress, and she actually brought me on to direct it. So it's really cool. And it was, it's like about these 2 friends who are out, and we filmed it in like the Badlands in Alberta.
I'm looking at some images on IMDb, and they're pretty stunning.
Yeah, it was really cool the way that it all worked out. And it's like about these 2 friends and sort of reconnecting like in their like early 30s, and they were really, really interesting like characters. And I don't even want to say too much, but it was really, really fun, and it was really challenging, and it was great because Emily found the script, and it was actually written by another good friend of mine, Haleigh Wright, and it was probably like way more ambitious than I would have chosen to do for my next direct. It was like we had to do like 24 pages in like 3 days outside, and it was like a lot, and it was like I was like but I actually learned a lot more. And what I really realized, which was an interesting learning experience, was a lot of times when I ran out of time, I wound up having to be more creative. And like it was a good lesson to learn if I hopefully continue to direct, is like there was like one scene where they were in a car, and I was like, because I was trying to, I was also trying to make sure everything ran and we got all the right footage, and I wasn't trying to I wanted to make sure I had like written like 3 simple shots. I was like, let's just get 3 simple shots for this. And we didn't have time. And so we got to do something much more interesting where we were like in the back seat and you could see their eyes and like the mirrors, and it was just more interesting. And so it's something to learn. I think I learned a lot on it. So
even with all of your acting experience, is there anything that as a director made you think, I've been in front of the lens this entire time. How did I not realize that this was done this way?
Ooh, this was done this way. I'm trying to think if there was something technical that I learned. I mean, the thing that I learned was just that it's a very different kind. It's such a different kind of mental grind, directing. Because as an actor, you're constantly sort of like managing almost like these peaks. You know, you come to set and you have a scene where you have to yell or where you have to be sad, or even just a very simple scene where you have to be natural. The whole day is making sure that you're in the right headspace to sort of like do that sprint, you know? So it is a marathon, but you're also working towards these sprints. Whereas even just directing something for 3 days, you feel every second of the day. And you don't necessarily have specific spikes in pressure. You might actually have time where you don't have anything to do for half an hour, but that half an hour you're spent going, why? Like, what's going on? What's going on? And you feel, I couldn't believe it. You feel every second of the day. And it's you know, it was just so funny to me. It was such a different kind of grind. Because there's times where you're on set and you're an actor and you're sitting around with the other actors and they go, hey, you know, we're not going to do the scene right away. It's going to be another 45. And you're just like, unless it's a really tough scene, you're probably just like, okay, you know, all right, it's another 45 minutes. All right, okay, that doesn't mess up what I'm doing. You know, I'll just make sure not, you know, whatever. And as a director, you know, 45 minutes go by, you're just like, oh my God, like, you know, it's like a complete disaster.
It's like watching the sunset. Yeah,
exactly. You just wind up like pacing around and like.
What's the on-set vice? Like, what do you do when you get super stressed, or, you know, just operating at an 11 as a director the entire time? What do you reach for to kind of chill out a little?
Afterwards or during it?
Maybe both. It could be two different things in those categories too.
I think I probably didn't chill out. I mean, I didn't get heated or anything, but I feel like, those 3 days I was basically just sort of like, just pacing around, walking around, you know. And you try to like plan ahead as much as possible, which doesn't sound like a way to chill out, but it helps you. It helps you later, I think.
I get it.
I love to calm down by doing more work personally.
It sounds silly, but like it is one of those funny things where if you can do it in a way where like, you know, there's nothing more frustrating than when you've had 45 minutes and you're sitting around waiting and then you have to do something and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm also not prepared.
Right.
Like, and then you get more mad because you're like, I waited around for 45 minutes and now it's even harder. Whereas if I would have done, which is, you know.
Yeah, I'm an over-preparer. I get it. But now I'm not going to let you get out of that second half of that question. What is the vice after the fact?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think. I mean, those days it was just going home to sleep. But, I mean, for me, it's funny. Because I'm such a fan of movies and stuff, a lot of times film is actually the vice that can get me out. It's weird. It seems weird sometimes, I think, even to me. But, yeah, if I have, like, a audition that I didn't feel like went very well or there's something about the industry that's stressing me out, a lot of the times a movie can actually get my mind off it sometimes, you know.
Do you have a go-to feel-good movie?
I don't think so. It's funny, it's funny you're talking about watching the same movie over and over and over again because I've only just recently started to just rewatch. I mean, I kind of was always so obsessed with watching something new. And I think when I was really young and like, I remember being like so young, like 13, being like, why rewatch a film? Like I literally said that I was 13, I was like, not like literally ever, but I was like, you know, come on. I mean, you know, you've seen it. You know what happens. You know what you thought about it. And now I'm like getting into like, now being like my mid-20s, I'm like, oh, like, man, I don't even really remember what happened in that movie from like 5 or 6 years ago. Like there's and now I'm really enjoying going back and rewatching things because it always blows my mind. So to answer your question, I don't know if there's a movie, but I think my favorite genre is actually like almost like the detective genre or the thriller genre. I always find that's like the thing that I find the most comforting. It's like some kind of like mystery or like a murder or like some kind of like I always feel like that's the thing that is easiest for me to relax when there's that engine, because I like other films as well, but I always feel like it's just something with that engine of like.
Saying a murder mystery is the way to relax is probably the exact statement you should make in this room right now.
Exactly.
It's like whenever I need to like lose myself and turn off, I'm either watching Jurassic Park or Scream. So
exactly. Yeah. It's just certain things like they just kind of like, I think that's what's great about, you know, great genre filmmaking is that there's a real ride component to it, right? There's something that's very exciting and you actually do feel taken away, even if it's just like, because it's even if it's something as simple as like a courtroom drama. I went through a period where I was watching a lot of those for a little while. And like, there's just something nice about being like, did they do it or not? I don't know. And I'm going to find out. And then, you know, it's like, there's something really refreshing about that sometimes where you're just like, you kind of know what's going to happen, and you can kind of, but you don't know either. I think that's what's great about thrillers, is that it's a genre that you can see the same formula a million times, but you can always be surprised at the end of it, right? If it's done well.
I feel like you're the kind of person, I'm just making this assumption now, that finds like the good in even the worst movie. Like you can always find something positive about it. Is that true?
That sounds like you.
I think
Except the kitchen, maybe.
No, I can even see good in the kitchen. I'm trying to think now of what. No, I have answers to that actually.
I definitely do try to do that too. Yeah, I definitely am. But I also like to do the opposite too. Like I like to even the movies that I really, really like, I do like to try to be like hard on them as well. You know, because I feel like there is also a thing of like, I feel like I'm both in that I pretty much enjoy every movie I watch and I can find the good in it. But I do feel like I'm one of those film watchers where if something's like really off, it is a little harder for me to forgive it. Like I'll talk to people where they'll be like, yeah, I really didn't like the whole way the third act ended, but what a great film. I'm like, wait, no. Like, I'm like, like those lasting 15 minutes derailed it. Like, you know.
What were you rooting for at the Oscars?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I it's funny because a lot of my favorite movies this year actually were stuff that was up there. I was probably, even though I think I might have liked The Irishman a little bit more, I was rooting, and I like Marriage Story a lot too. I was probably rooting for Parasite just because I love so much foreign cinema, and especially like a lot of Asian cinema I've been watching recently. And I do think it's exciting for the Oscars to award foreign language films. You know, it's with the Best Picture Oscar. I think it's just so exciting because the Oscars really is like an internationally revered award, and I think it means something to filmmakers of every country. And so I think if this is ushering in sort of like a new era where those types of films are like, when I have a foreign language film in my at least top 10 like every year, you know, there's at least one, if not many of them, but there's at least one every year. So, you know, obviously I'd love to see more win, but I'd love to see a foreign language film get nominated like every year for Best Picture because I feel like, you know,
probably should be.
Yeah, because there's specific genres too that they say never get recognized, like horror or something like that. Yeah. But which would be nice to see as well. But I think foreign films is even so much broader. I mean, we're talking about the whole world, so it's exciting. I mean, every year there should definitely be something that kind of breaks through. So that was what was exciting to me.
Yeah, I was in New Orleans and we couldn't get the feed to work at the place we were staying, so I was sort of keeping up on Twitter. Yeah. But even just watching all the Parasite wins happen that way was like such a joyful, cool, unusual experience.
Yeah, it was cool. And Bong Joon-ho came off so great, and like all that. Seems like such an awesome guy. And like when he gave Marty Scorsese a shout out, and then they all stood up. Like Scorsese got a standing O like in his acceptance speech. I mean, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. It was so awesome. It
was a good ceremony, and don't worry, you caught up on Janelle Monáe's performance, so we're all okay.
Yes. Thank you for making sure that I did.
Always got your back with that. All right, let's talk a little more about Color Out of Space.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I'm just very curious reading that script right off the bat, because so much of what makes that movie special to me and stand out is all the stuff that might be accomplished in post and cutting it together, especially when we're talking about, you know, the horror genre and the effectiveness of editing, score, sound design, all of that. So what was your first impression of the script, and then what did you wind up thinking when you saw the final cut?
Yeah. So the script, certainly, there was a little bit of a lookbook that accompanied the script where they talked about some of the stuff they were going to try to do with the color. So it was obvious that they definitely had an idea of what they wanted to do. Richard had an idea, and the whole kind of thing was behind it. And I definitely, but what's great about the script is that it definitely, a lot of the crazy wild stuff, such as like, spoiler alert, like the fusing and things like that, is there. And you kind of like read it and you kind of know that it's definitely, the stakes are being upped in a really, really exciting, wild way. But yeah, I think, you know, you read a line in the script and I think it's, Ward sees a glimpse of the alien world where the color comes from. It's unlike anything you've ever seen. You think that could be anything. Like, you don't know, right? And I mean, I had so much faith in the Richard and the producers and stuff, so I wasn't worried. But yeah, you do read that in a script. You're like, I can't even speak to what this is going to be, right? So yeah, it was amazing. I mean, the first time I saw it was at the Toronto Film Festival premiere. That's the first time I saw it, and it was awesome. It was really overwhelming. And you're right. I think that it was really elevated by score and editing and different things, and so that was really, really cool.
And performance.
Oh yeah, just a little bit of that.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
seriously though.
But that kind of stuff. I mean, I think a lot. You know, it was a great ensemble of actors, and I just think, like, just from my perspective, everyone else was so locked in and so great from the beginning that and I think that helps because you almost have to have both, right? You have to have, you know, and I think Richard as a director did a good job of balancing both of these, but you have to have a visual vision and a sensory vision for how the horror is going to like impact you and overtake you. But then you do need actors and a dialogue that feels real, and you need people to like buy in and they
have to care about the people or it doesn't work.
And you as like the actors have to care about it. As if I remember when we were doing the scenes where there's been like the two family members have fused together and it's very like traumatic. And I remember talking to Madeline Arthur, who plays Lavinia, and we were saying like, wow, like we kind of have to play this. Like this might be kind of like funny in like a weird, crazy, like midnight way to an audience, right? Like some of this stuff might get a laugh. You never know when she like is licking stuff out of the bowl, or at the very least you're gonna get what's going on? But like, and there is a black comic energy running through the whole thing, I think, at different times. But as an actor, like you have to buy in like full on that you're like at your mother's like deathbed, you know? And that's a really interesting challenge, I think, as an actor, where you're like, I have to like take this as seriously as if I'm doing like a serious drama where, you know, it's all about this mother who's sick. And so that was really, even though you know it's going to be a lot more wild and there's going to be all this crazy stuff.
What scares you in general? Like,
I just want to say real quick, it translated though, because I did not laugh at that scene.
No, totally.
I didn't laugh either.
No. And but that's the thing about the tone is that once I saw it, I realized like, okay, wow, like it really did play in the way that it felt, which is awesome.
Oh yeah,
and I was glad to have it play that way.
That is mighty freaky, just because I think of the tone that they set the entire time. But also, like going back to how good the performances are, a movie like that doesn't work unless that core family comes together right at the very beginning and establishes all their unique relationships with each other that you guys do very well.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But I wanted to know what scares you in the horror movies that you watch in general, and what is it like seeing something like those fusion scenes on set? I mean, you know, you assess how it might be viewed from an audience perspective, but what's the first glimpse at the practical effects for you like?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. There was some good practical effects on the set, too, which was cool. There was actually some things. But yeah, when you see it all together and they're, like, literally fused and things like that, it was definitely troubling.
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about you saying what scares me in films.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I had this, you know, weirdly enough, going back to, like, things. And it's so funny how the things that happen to you in, like, the first, like, 5 or 6 years of your life define, like, things that scare you. But for whatever reason, like my biggest fear as a kid was like the specter. And look, you have to tell your kids this. Everyone should, but like the specter of the stranger. You know, like the stranger who is gonna come and like, you know, get me. You know, and like it's silly, but like I seriously remember that was probably my most profound fear at like 5 or 6 years old. That like there was a stranger out there. And so I think it goes back to like the faceless thing. I think the things that scare me the most are sort of like the unseen force that can do you harm, but often the things that scare me the most are like when it does manifest itself in like a person. There's something very troubling to me about a person.
I can understand
even if they're possessed by a demon or something like that. It's like that. I think those are the things that scare me the most.
I always assume that my like knee-jerk response to that question, because Haleigh knows this, I always like to play like, how would you survive in a zombie apocalypse or something like that. And I'm always like, I could run away and do something like physical to save myself. But when it comes to paranormal entities like I can't process fully in the movie or just in general, I feel like when I can't defend myself, that's what burrows its way into my brain and makes me think that I'm screwed.
I get both. Like in films, what actually gets my blood going and the heart rate up and the chills is paranormal stuff. In the like life, I am terrified of humans. Because they will kill you.
Yeah.
And I've never met a ghost, but I've met many humans.
I thought you had ghosty experiences.
I'm not really the person for it. It's not that I don't believe. I'm just like the person who has no thank you energy.
Oh, okay. You said that.
I'm not into it.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I got too many things to do.
I've got all of like the yes please energy, but no one's listening to me.
You're like, please, someone,
like,
ghosts, please.
What's going on here?
Haunt me.
You have to play a little hard to get with the ghosts.
Yeah.
You have to play a little more cool, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe. I'm going to start like my next door neighbor who could see into my living room window is just going to see me like strutting around the apartment, like pretending I'm not trying to conjure something now.
And then you're going to talk to them next week and be like, there was a ghost in my apartment. Like, you? I've been. He's like, yeah, it was just I felt
Got
it.
the wrong
it was just,
address.
I don't know.
So let's get into some like upcoming stuff for you. What's new? What are you working on? It's like I've got the IMDb upcoming page here just for reference, but I know it's not always accurate.
Yeah, as far as I know, well, I think the next thing that's going to come out is I did this film called Unfollowed with Baslev's company behind like Unfriended and Searching.
This is what I'm looking at.
Yeah. So we did, and we did some reshoots on that recently too, and I think it's going to probably come out pretty soon. So I think that's the next thing, and that was a cool process because I guess I shouldn't say too much about it, but it was another one of those like Screen Life things where it looks like it's all happening on an app specifically, and so. That was really fun to be a part of that, and the other actors were really great.
Endlessly fascinated by Screen Life.
I think
that's interesting.
Timur was our first ever guest.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I thought you were going to bring up the latest news about him and Screen Life, where I think he's exploring vertical formats in projection.
So people, I believe it's so people can watch it on their phone.
Oh, wow, yeah. It's amazing the development of that kind of stuff, of how you'll be able to now watch so many things. Things are now being designed to be watched on your phone, which I think is sort of interesting.
What is your take on all of that? It's like also because we're about to see the launch of something like Kwibi. Do you personally have a taste for I don't know, like short form, short, chapter content like that?
Yeah.
We don't know what it is yet.
Know what to call it.
Well, it's funny. I think it's the thing that's really got me even more excited about it was actually I've been talking about doing masterclass, and they're kind of like 10-minute episodes, and so now I found that I've because I take the subway a lot and different things like that, and I'll like be able to watch one on the subway. I'll be like, oh great, like I'll watch this 10-minute thing and I'll find the time. And so there are a lot of times. It's funny with how on the go we are now, because it used to be that what was so convenient about TV is you're like, well, I don't really have like 2 hours, but I can put this on for 45 minutes and work my way through the story. And I think that there will be a place for that with 10 minutes, I think there will be I'm sitting in the car, it's 10 minutes before I got to go in here, let me just watch another episode of this. So I think
we're
there's
also
a place
at the point where like the lines are so blurred anyway. It's like movies, TV, web form. It's like as long as it's good storytelling,
exactly,
it's worth watching.
And I was talking to someone about this recently. I was thinking about how if you look at like movies and TV and that kind of as like an art form is so new compared to like any other major art form, whether it's, theater or symphony, like music or ballet or any kind of art form like that is like you can go back like to the dawn of like, it's like civilization and stuff like that. It was all there, like theater and music and it's evolved. And I just think, wow, I wonder what film is like. Not even like the talking movie is not even like 100 years old, And so you wonder like, will it even it's like, if you went to ancient Greece and played somebody, hard rock, they'd be like, I can't even comprehend what this is. And I sometimes wonder if like, us as people who love cinema, like if we were to jump forward that far in the future, it's like there would probably be some form of film that like we would just be like, I don't even know what this is. Like I can't even comprehend
like
that.
A Black Mirror episode.
Yeah.
Well, even just like the structural leaps that have happened since streaming became a thing and the way that people are playing with format is, and what's that, 10 years?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wild.
It's amazing because I remember when Netflix was like the service that like sent you DVDs and things like that. And I'll never forget like reading about like this new show, House of Cards, David Fincher. And then I'm like, Netflix? It's going to be on Netflix? Like that doesn't, they're going to release it all at once, not weekly? I remember being like, that's not a thing. Like, I'm like that's not, and then it, little do we know, it's like, it is the thing now.
What was it like being a part of that distribution model? Because I have to imagine that it's so much all at once when the show is released. Does it carry on longer, or do people is the attention span as short as we think it is?
Yeah, it is interesting because it is all out there at once. So it is a different thing because you're not interacting with it sort of like week by week. And I do have some friends that are on like shows that are week by week. And yeah, it's just a totally different experience where you're interacting with it week by week, whether it's via people on social media or just watching it, or whereas when it's all one big 8-hour chunk, but I think what's great about that in a weird way is like you kind of get it at different times. People catch up with it at different times, but usually once they're talking about it, they've seen it all, and so that it's a little bit less of like a drawn out sort of thing. I don't know if that's good or bad even. I feel like it is a bit different, right? And that,
How intense is the OA fandom still? Because I know that after the cancellation, it was quite. We got a little heavy with a hunger strike and like.
Oh yeah.
And I freaking adore that show, and I'm just devastated. Yeah,
it's and they really did have it planned out for all the 5 seasons. And I think that's the biggest tragedy for me is that I didn't even know fully like what I mean, we had little clues, but I mean, I didn't even know fully the whole arc of that show was going to be. And like, I know they had it planned, so it's a bummer that like we don't get to see it. And I think that's the thing, that it would be hard to wrap it up in now like a couple of hours or something, because it truly was like a meticulously planned. And I think what's cool, I was thinking about this just the other day. I was like, when we were doing the first season of the OA, there was a scene that they sent out at like the very, very end. And they were like, oh, this is going to be like after the credits of like season 1. And it was San Francisco. She was in the place. Homer might have been the doctor. Like it was all the stuff. And that was like when we were doing season 1 in like 2016. Wow. And what's cool is that, and then they decided not to include it for whatever reason. I don't remember why, but for whatever reason, we watched it and we're like, oh, you never included that thing. Like it was only when I watched the season that I was like, oh, you didn't wind up putting that scene at the end after all. And it's so easy to look at the 2 seasons of the OA and go, wow, they just flipped everything over and went a totally different way, and they created this whole new thing. And it's they didn't. They knew that's where they were going from the beginning. So I'm sure we would have seen that bear even more fruit if they would have got to it more.
I can't. I'm so heartbroken.
Sorry, I'm making it worse.
No, you're not. I'd love to talk about it. But I think about this a lot with that show, because part of me is like, tell me the story. I don't care if you do a comic book,
right,
a novel. Tell me how the story ends. But then that's the power of like the format of cinema, is it really wouldn't be the same experience. And as hungry as I am to know that story in any format, there's something for how it was shot and performed, and the freaking movements. You can't do that on the page.
Yeah, I think what's so exciting about the OA, and the thing that I'm kind of most proud of being a part of it, is that it's not so many things now you can go, well, it's this meets this. It's just this with this little spin. And the OA is not, I mean, you can't say the OA is this meets that, or it's this thing, but they're just doing it in a different way, or they're mixing these 2 genres very specifically. It's like, it's it all. And something like the movements is so interesting, and to incorporate that in something. Like
it's like, it's always up there with Sense8 when I think about, because we talk a lot about Netflix becoming this algorithmic content creator, and definitely that's a thing. But there's also nowhere else I feel that those 2 shows would have gotten greenlit in the first place.
Right, and that's true. That's true of cinema too, where there's a lot of films that on Netflix that they get that extra budget and that extra support, and we get to like see those kinds of things done on a scale or with the resources that just might not seem financially viable to a studio right now.
Even for an iconic filmmaker like Martin Scorsese with The Irishman. The Irishman wouldn't have been made anywhere else but there.
Exactly, yeah.
I have one more movie I want to ask you about on your IMDb page, because I see the word camp, and I'm like, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because I love Sleepaway Camp.
Oh, yeah.
Does it have anything to do with that camp, or is it something else?
Sort of. I mean, that was a film, like I said, I can't speak to camp. I think it's still, they're figuring that out, but that was something that I did. Joey King is a good friend of mine, actually. And,
cool cast here.
Yeah, she produced that, and we did that a while, and she had a lot of her friends involved, and it was really fun, and the director, Josh Nunes, was great, but I don't know where we're at with that one.
That's so cool that she produced that, too.
Yeah.
She's like just one of those rising stars.
Yeah.
And Haleigh knows this too, but I get very excited when someone uses like the star power and the name value that they build to get projects off the ground that might not have gotten off the ground.
Yeah, no, I definitely think she's definitely has her eye on sort of making sure she's shepherding her own projects as well, which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I have one thing on your resume I wanted to ask about from 2011. I'm a known fan of the Buddies franchise.
Oh my!
Did you get to play with the dogs?
Yeah, that was a very. It's so funny because someone brought that up recently actually as well. That was like a 1-day role. So no, I wasn't. That was like a very like. I know it's.
You didn't get to live the Buddies fantasy.
No, so it's so interesting that they started doing all those buddies things like snow buddies and all this different stuff right around the time that I had like first got my like Vancouver agent. I was like auditioning, and I was like the right sort of age. And so I auditioned for so many of those buddies movies. But and funnily enough, that was the only one. It was like I was in Vancouver. At that point, I'd moved to do the show, so I was a local and to do Mr. Young. And yeah, I just like it's like a one. It's like I think I'm just like some punk kid smashing a pumpkin,
Nice.
and then like the ghostly buddies like blow my hair back. It was like literally like we're talking like 8 hours on set. So unfortunately, I don't have much of a buddies. I don't. That's not one of the more juicy things. All I want is to hang
out with one of those groups of buddies, space buddies, super buddies, spooky buddies. Give me the dogs.
Even you just saying space buddies like gives me flashbacks to doing audition tapes as a kid. Like it's hilarious. I'm like, I remember when I auditioned for that.
Those are my like if I am truly dying sick or dying hungover, I put on a buddies movie.
Oh wow, I've never tried that. Maybe that's a way to cure my hangovers.
It's just little dogs being cute.
I'll try it Sunday morning, and don't forget that Saturday night I'm going to ask you to do your OA movements. Oh, yeah. All right, I'm preparing you in advance.
It happens sometimes with different people where they'll like, you know, I remember there was even an actor in the second season that came up to us and who worked on the second season. And she was like, I know the moves, boom, and she just went right in. And I was like, whoa.
Fantastic.
Most people are still better than I am. You know, like I said, I'm not sure I got there, some version of it.
Does they at all feel like a bicycle thing where you could probably do an approximation of them at any point in your life now?
I think so. We rehearsed them so much that I do think that I could do it in sequence any moment. I just think it would not be very good. But yeah. But yeah, I think I remember. It's a good skill to have, though. I don't know. Maybe I gotta remember. I haven't done it in a while.
Clearly, I haven't. Haleig's been telling me to catch up on the OA, and then all that happened, and I'm like, is it just gonna hurt to start and know it's gonna end? But just curious, is it like, can we put you in the middle of like Hollywood and say like go and then film it from afar, like just to see how people react if you do the movement?
That's funny.
There was one, right? Ideas. There was a flash mob.
Yeah,
a couple
there
of
were a few. Yeah,
okay. There were a few.
But
around,
I believe those people like train a lot in advance before they go out and do them.
I want to see what happens.
Someone needs to develop a workout program around it because it really is like.
Maybe that's my in.
Because it's a weird combination of like yoga and movement.
It's really far out.
I'm a bad dancer. I know, but the fact that you don't like dancing either gives me a little encouragement that maybe I could get into it.
Like I said, I've never been more convinced that like I was going to be fired, and I was like, I was so scared.
That always freaks me out about getting cast in roles too, because it's like, yes, acting is like skill set number one, but what if it's like, I don't know, just like a very basic thing like that you can't do? Like, what if I scored the dream role of a lifetime and someone said to me, you got to sing in this movie? I'm like, fuck, I'm out of here.
I know. That was like this. I was all excited, and then I got there, and I was like, but they did not mention that at all.
So weird.
They did not mention that at all. I did a meeting with Brendan Meyer when I was auditioning, and they never once were like, hey, can you move? Like, they never once said, like, do you have a dance training or anything? So that was my only hope. Where I'm like, they never asked. Like,
they probably wanted people who don't look like dancers, right? That's kind of the point.
Yeah, and I think that there is something to be said for. I mean, the direction was always like, it's more about you believe in the movement. It's more than But there was certainly. But the thing that was kind of fun about that is that the characters are learning them through the process of the scenes as well.
Yeah.
And we didn't shoot the final scene of the first season really was like one of the last things that we shot.
That's cool.
And it actually was one of those times where like the way that they shot it, the first season feels like the guys or the boys are like training for some kind of mission and like learning because they'll be called upon to do it. And weirdly enough, the whole first shoot felt a bit like that. It actually mirrored that in real life where we were learning these movements, knowing that we had this big scene at the end that was going to we were going to have to deliver. So
it's so wild. That scene, when I first saw it, I definitely was one of the people that was like, I don't know, man, that's weird. But now, having completely fallen in love with the show, which the second season sort of affirmed for me when I got a bigger sense of the story, I cannot watch that scene without crying. Yeah. Impossible to achieve.
It is kind of a wild scene, and that was definitely something that I discovered reading the scripts for the first time. They did not hint that to me. Obviously, they wouldn't because I didn't have the part yet. So in the meeting, they didn't hint it at all, right? And that was, and I remember, I think Zal and Britt have talked about this, and I think more and more the idea of combating, like, violence with something that isn't, like, aggression back is, like, very, very, like, meaningful. Whether or not the ending totally works for you, that sentiment is like
now?
For you now it does. Yeah, but I mean even for other people, like even if you don't, there is something really, really like profound about that I even feel like even years later, I'm like, there's something really wonderful about like someone comes at you with aggression and you don't go back. You sort of like send love because you're still committing and you're still doing an action, but you're not. It's not an act of aggression.
Yeah, you know? It's really beautiful. My last OA thing I'll say, because I know we're running out of time here. I may have already told you this, but I met Brendan for the first time or like had our first real conversation at the free-for-all, and I had just binged season 2 of the OA, and the second season ends in a way, it's in like an interdimensional show that sort of bridges a gap between the show and reality in a little bit. So then I walk into the room and see him, and I was just like, "What's happening in my life?"
Oh, he was in your world. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm gonna. I feel like I've been saying this to you in particular long enough at this point. I need to binge watch.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
There's a lot. I think even in those 2 seasons is great. You know, there's a new character they introduced in the second season too, who kind of is like one of the main characters of the second season, and he kind of gets like a full story actually. Yeah. So the second season, if you look at it, even from his perspective, like he actually has like a whole arc through that, and they devote a lot of time to him. And so I think the second, if you want to look at it just purely from that, it's pretty satisfying.
Netflix is downloadable, so
that's
I have no excuse.
That's
always
right
my
there.
thing. Is that when it's downloadable, it makes it so much more accessible than everything else.
Alone on a crowded plane.
You got the buddies comment, so I'm stealing one of 2 questions right now. We
asked
always ask this of all of our guests.
Yeah.
Do you have any pets?
I do. So I had a dog and a cat growing up. The dog's no longer with us, but I have a cat still, yeah.
What's the cat's name?
Friskles. And the dog's name was Dr. Phil, actually.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
Was he rude?
Choice.
Was he invasive about your private issues? I don't know, Dr. Phil. He could be lovely in person. I've only seen the show.
I don't know. All I know is like he became Phil pretty quickly. Yeah. Because you're at the dog park and you're like, "Hey, Dr. Phil." You're like, no, he's Phil now. Like you're not gonna yell that out in a public space anymore. You know, when I was young, it was my idea. It was like if we got a girl dog, I was gonna name it Oprah. Like I had this idea that it was like a funny thing to do. I mean, I was like pretty young, so I didn't even have
that.
like
it's fun.
I didn't even have like a.
You could go on and on. Like, I feel like you should get another dog and name her Kelly Clarkson now. It's like a little 40-year-old virgin in there too.
A dog. Lots of fun to be had. All right.
Question number 2.
Question number 2 is what have you watched, listened to, read, played, game, whatever that's in the genre sphere that you're really excited about lately? Can be old, new.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I actually just watched a film that there's a couple actually like older genre films, like 60s films that I thought really, really held up. Have you seen Wait Until Dark? You know, with Audrey Hepburn, which I thought was so awesome. Yeah, it held up so well, and it's like for people who don't, anyone who's listening that doesn't know, it's Audrey Hepburn. There's like this cocaine is smuggled in this doll, and they're trying to smuggle it across the border from like Canada to the U.S. And then, long story short, the doll winds up in the hands of this like guy because the woman who's smuggling it realizes she's going to be caught, so she gives it to this random stranger. And so this doll is somewhere in the house of this couple, and the wife is Audrey Hepburn, but she's blind. And so these people show up to try to like get the doll back, but we don't even know as an audience. Like it's not like sitting on a shelf, right? So they can't just go in and steal it. So they have, it's such an ingeniously written movie, I think, in that the way that they use the fact that she's blind both to show the intelligence of the plan and how they try to manipulate her around how she's blind and how they're able, and also then how she's able to use being blind to her advantage, and the way that gives her also an advantage over them, or how she works around it. It's really clever.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
That's a good pull.
I've never seen it.
Oh.
Yeah, I just watched it for the first time a couple weeks ago, like randomly.
That's going on my list. But Haleigh, before we leave, you should check your Slack, because I just put something important on your reading list.
Slack on my reading list? I don't look at Slack when we're podcasting.
Just click on the link that I just sent you.
Oh, uh-oh. Oh, no. We've got a C, a B, and a D here.
The classic CDB.
Or CDB. I can't read.
It's a real thing.
Not CBD. That's something else.
That helps me sleep.
And what is that one? NRES.
What is this thing that you stumble? What is this thing?
And I don't, I can't decipher the
For
code.
anyone who's
the
deeply
code anymore.
confused, this is the book Perri was talking about as a kid. I'm just so impressed you found it.
It's a real thing.
NQ equals
was like-
thank you.
Yeah, the
It's
receipts,
a
Perri.
code.
You know,
I
you started
guarantee
just
you I
saying
could-
random letters, and I thought, I don't know.
I could go to
but
my
you had the
parents' house
receipts.
and pull out the hard copy still
Wow.
of this book.
I think the next episode of The Witching Hour, you have to like have it behind you.
a live reading.
Next
Live-
time I go to New York, do not forget. I will bring it back and I will live read a chat. If there are even chapters in this book, oh God,
The audiobook. You should find the audiobook.
I should do the
You should do the
audiobook.
audiobook
Yes.
of CBD.
I'm gonna be like cackling and laughing the entire time. It's gonna be a problem.
It's gonna be
All right. Thank you so much, Brendan,
Oh,
for
no,
coming
thank
in
you guys.
today.
Oh, thanks for having me on. This was
Where
great.
can everyone find you on the interwebs? Is
Yeah.
it Instagram, Twitter, anything?
Yeah, so my Twitter and Instagram are both Brendan KJ Meyer, because I have two middle names, Kurt and James, so that's why.
Fancy.
KJ. Yeah, Brendan KJ Meyer on both those. Yep.
And Haleigh.
You can find me at Haystack McGroovy on Instagram and Haleigh Fouch on Twitter.
And I'm P. Nemiroff on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you again
Yeah,
for being
thank you
here
guys.
with
This is
us
awesome.
today. Thank you to everybody out there watching and listening. You have officially survived the witching hour.